Aloha, and welcome to another Candid Conversation. We're joined today by one of the unique groups of people. This is one of the few power couples in our industry. And I don't know which one is more powerful. You know, Joseph's pursuing his doctorate, Joseph Albright. Jen has been working within dealers for, God knows, I won't say anything relative to age-wise, but these two are amazing. Welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
What we're going to do is wander down a little bit of memory lane, talk about current situations and a little bit about the future. And it's all about how computers, business systems, process has changed in the dealership world. And being the oldest, let me start, because I took a computer science course in 1964, where I learned how to wire unit record equipment. And those damn machines are in museums. That's it. Unfortunately, I'm not. Nobody wants to pay to see this stuff. But then dealer data processing, I think, for Caterpillar was the very first service bureau where they had the computer. Dealers would send in forms. Processes where the reports went back, and it went back and forth that way. And if I'm not mistaken, Joseph, that's where you started with Caterpillar as a trainer for DDPD. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was the Caterpillar dealer business system.
Right. And then at that time, Jen, I think you were working with a Caterpillar dealer.
Yes, although he started at CAT long before I ever came on the scene.
Yeah, well, he's much older. I understand that.
That's true.
So with that as a starting point, when you guys started with computers and systems relative to dealers, how did that go? How did it happen from your perspective?
When I came in, I was in training and in support as well, but the dealers would come in and get trained on the system so that they could be prepared for the implementer to go out and configure a system. And it was all on premise, it was all AS400, green screen application. And it was a system like an ERP system that had sales, parts, service, equipment, inventory, etc., and then a third-party attachment of a accounting system. And then once the dealers got trained up, the implementers would go out, work with them on how they wanted to configure it, and then configure it and implement
it. And Jen, when you were working with the Caterpillar dealers yourself, you were involved with the systems, correct?
Yeah. I had worked with the dealer community on implementing procurement systems and other related bolt-ons to the dealer business system in GL. And in that case, I would say, overall, embracing technology was not quite really a thing just yet. There were a lot of people still embracing paper, not necessarily keen on changing things.
Yeah.
That's definitely been an evolution over time.
Yeah, it was a huge change management ordeal.
Yeah, it really was. I was hired at the Caterpillar dealer, the first one, to fix a problem with the system for exactly what you were talking about, Joseph, and you also, Jennifer, the inventory management package was highly sophisticated with statistics, and that was my background. And the inventory had grown triple, quadruple the size because the variables inside the program were incorrect. They were multiplying everything by 10, and it was missed. And it was assembler language programming, and it's hard like hell to find that stuff anyways. But as we've and let me mention brand names just for a moment, and it's all of them. We've got SAP, Microsoft, Infor, Exact, JD Edwards, Oracle, DIS, eEmphasis, CDK, all of these and others that are out there. And so now it becomes a little bit of, and technology has changed. Computer power has changed. We can do things with telematics today that we never were able to do, with sensors in machines and life cycle management, all of that stuff how the heck does a dealer who really doesn't have those technology skills on as an employee, how do they select one?
Well, first they had to, and they started to acquire their own IT departments.
Right, right.
They had these AS400s, and they were already using them anyway. It's starting to anyway in the 90s. But, and again, I'm not going to pick on any particular group, but what became evident was that as you were working with the customer, it became more imperative to understand how they were doing things instead of just coming in and saying, this is where we're going to take you. That was always the notion. It didn't matter who it was. We're going to come in and this is where we're going to take you. And they're all like, oh, okay, great. That's awesome. But there was no starting point. And I used to reference a GPS necessity. You know, for a GPS to function properly, you need a point of origin and a destination. If you don't have the point of origin, you can't possibly get to your destination. So it became apparent that, and Jennifer and I were starting to embrace that, you know, is that it became more important to understand the as is. How are you currently doing business? What's your processes? People wanted to divorce systems and processes, and that was a mentality for a long time. And then later it became evident that they had to be intertwined. You couldn't take them apart.
Actually, that was kind of coincidental to the early 80s with the, you know, continuous quality improvement or total quality management or whatever the heck. And I guess that's, you know, part of where you were going, Jen, within the dealer, documenting the process and how we could make things better.
Yes. And that's like Joe just said, you know, a really important piece of the process. Partly because, as he said, the providers as a whole say, hey, we can do this, you know, these amazing things and you know, be all things to all people. But in reality, you know, I don't think there really is one best system. It's what's the best system for you.
Right.
And so it becomes really critical to look at the systems, look at exactly what you need, you know, and where the gaps are, because in a lot of cases, there are things that you're not doing at all that you need to be. Or that you're doing right now that don't need to be done at all because, you know, those processes were introduced, you know, 3 generations ago by someone who was, you know, using a spreadsheet or a punch card or what have you, and isn't necessary anymore. So trying to kind of weed through those things and come to what's actually necessary, you know, and that goes into the RFP process and picking the right supplier for you.
Yeah, and Joseph mentioned GPS, I think, is a wonderful analogy. You need an origin. So those processes that have been around there 2 or 3 generations, who started it, why, and what's the legacy? And then I call those sacred cows, and we got to shoot the damn things, you know. But it's getting people to change in this. You know, again, we talked earlier before we started about green screen, and it's amazing how quick certain people were on green screen. They'd get 2 or 3 screens ahead of themselves on the keyboard, and it was okay.
And those in the service and people that were customer facing loved that because the system, the keyboard would memorize. It knew that you could get 5 screens ahead. So if you were doing the same thing, you could go very quickly. Yeah. And then when the GUI interface came along, and they tried to do screen scraper, for example, technology to take the green screen and turn it into a GUI interface, people were like, I don't know how to, this is too slow.
Or heaven forbid if you had to use a mouse instead of just 17 times and then let it catch up to you.
Yeah, I had a guy completely flip out on me because the screensaver came on and he thought he broke the system.
Well, there was a brand, I think it was K-Pro, back in the 70s, that had a portable computer. It was really rudimentary. But when you turned the power on, the first thing that came on the screen was hit a key, any key. Mm-hmm. And you hit the key and the screen went, you know, well, you didn't break it, you know, to try and get people over the hump. But, you know, you mentioned GUI interface and here comes a relational database and all this other technology stuff. Initially, I think most of the people that were recommending systems were consulting companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, when I was working with SAP, you know, at the time, that was their consultants did the implementation.
Yes.
And other companies did as well. That was their mode of implementation. We build it, but we don't implement it. We hire people consultants implement. We
Yeah,
train.
it's kind of the way that their companies are set up too. They've got a sales force that's out there peddling the product. Then they've got a group of people that install the product. They know the product really well, but they don't really know our business at all.
Right.
Then you've got the customer service people that answer questions on the phone that haven't really visited a dealership. That's like the counter and telephone sales that have never been out to a job site. And then you got product development. And they have user groups, right? We're going to have 10 people that are going to help us determine what we need to do with the package and making it better. And I was brought into the States to run EBS. They're no longer in existence in a major way, but I was asked to package it for sale. And they had 450 dealers at one time on the service bureau. And when I arrived, I think we had 90 or 100 that were still there because they didn't want to lose that batch cash cow by selling an online system.
Yeah.
We've seen, even you guys have seen a hell of a lot of change.
Well,
So how does a dealer go through the process of making the decision of a selection? Do they still use outsiders?
Well, what I see in a lot of cases, which, good news, bad news, obviously, in our industry, everybody knows everybody. So what do? They call a friend and say, what are you using? Do you like it? And that does carry some weight, but by the same token, as I think we all know here, no two dealers are exactly alike, even if they sell the same type of equipment. And so you end up in a situation where, my friend Bob said this one is great. We're just going to go ahead with this. And, had they actually gone through the process of, like Joe said, figuring out their current processes, figuring out their requirements, they may have come to a very different conclusion. And then they put in this system without necessarily having someone on site, on staff who really knows how to run an implementation or knows what questions to ask. And then the end result is, wow, this system stinks. It's terrible. Yeah. I mean, it may be a perfectly fine system, but it may not have been the right choice for them, or, or may not have been implemented well.
So the first thing a dealer should do is understand themselves. They should document their processes and identify what are the pain points they're experiencing in those processes. If they can't do that themselves, then we obviously are happy, as consultants that do that, sometimes it's best to have an outsider come in because we can see things that they themselves don't see. Right?
Yeah, you brought up a really important thing, pain points. What wakes you up at night?
Yeah,
because they're there in every single aspect of every single business.
Yeah.
And so how like you help dealers select systems?
We help them first identify what they do. We go in and we help them understand themselves. We document their processes. We map it out. And then we identify those pain points. Then we say, okay, this is the gap. These are the pain we're trying to resolve. That helps. Now let's go out and see what kind of systems can resolve at least 80 to 90%, if not, no company can resolve all of them, but using the 80-20 rule, who can resolve most of these? And that will be our short list, right? And then we develop a scorecard based on that to down select those that could meet that goal.
Well, not to be too smart about it, but when I look around, because I do systems advisory work as well and evaluations, but I don't know that other than you two who have background in this business, I don't know that there's many out there that are helping dealers on system selection that know the business. And I don't know how you can help somebody if you don't know the damn business. Like you say, Joseph, creating a process flowchart of everything that goes on in the business today.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's bad? What's tough?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I have a black belt in Six Sigma. I'm certified PMP, project management professional. And one of the things that came out of learning those was, because I would often be on projects like engineering projects. I'm not an engineer. I don't even have on my desk. I am not an engineer. But I know how to run a project. I know how to ask questions. I know how to pull in resources that do have that expertise. And so
Well,
that's
just to interrupt you a little bit more insofar as blowing your own horn, if I understand right, you teach 3 classes on supply chain at Bradley University and Indiana University as well. Am I saying it wrong?
economics, statistics, and accounting.
Yeah.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah, just all the easy stuff, right? Yeah, it's kind of so there's a kudo, and I'm not shy. These two know what the hell they're doing. So if you need help, get in touch with them. They're a contributor and a colleague on our website. You can directly connect with them there. But so that's the end of that commercial.
Appreciate that.
So we get that chart together. I suspect then you start involving different providers. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes. And the other thing to bear in mind is, outside of those functional requirements that come from the process mapping exercises, you have, the more standard requirements. What are the hours of support? When is support available? What part of the world is support located in? Are there support levels that are available if you need, 24/7 access? All the general T's and C's that kind of go into it so that you can really compare apples to oranges, because sometimes people get into a project and then realize after they've signed, oh, wait, all the consultants are on another continent and they're 7 hours off from us. And how are we supposed to make this work?
Yeah.
Better to find those things out ahead of time and know what you're dealing with than be disappointed on such a large investment.
Yeah, and again, obviously cost is a factor too, but if you're only going to concentrate on cost, then there's all the other opportunity costs that you're not looking at that'll bite you in the butt.
And that's something I have a hard time as a person and have done forever. I'm not interested at all in cost. I'm interested in value.
Right.
And that becomes the process flow stream. And everything that we see in our society, just look at entertainment, where we started with movies only, black and white, silent. Then we went to color. Then we went to voice. Then we went to, oh my goodness, television. And then we went to Blockbuster and renting VCRs. And, oh, you made a mistake, you went beta. Well, all of these things and so in our little microcosm as dealers, and these dealers are not small anymore, probably if I look at the world, I would bet you 75% of the dealers are $1 billion or more today. That's pretty big stuff. In Canada, when I started, there were 10 Caterpillar dealers. Today, there's 2, one east, one west. Finning's one of them, and they're probably 18 billion last year. Torremont's not far behind. Holt, we're talking big guys. Now, same thing's true with Deere. You got Rush and you got RDO, and same thing's true with Komatsu. You got the trading company. Same thing's true with Volvo. It's becoming a big boys game. It's too much money for small people anymore.
It is, but that you bring up an interesting topic though, because while we do have quite a few multi-billion-dollar dealerships out there, there are still a very large number of dealers that are in that 20 million to 100 million. And that's so, you can't say that price doesn't matter, because you can offer somebody a $3 million system if they're selling $25 million a year.
Yeah, and the other side of that, Jen, I think, is that there's very little available for that price point. 20 to 75. I'll broaden it. I'll make it up to 75 million. It's very hard to find a system that's cost effective.
Yeah.
From the Mahindra dealers, Bobcat dealers, Kubota dealers, there's a whole bunch of these guys that are in that
rental dealers.
Rental dealers as well. And that's that's another thing that's kind of intriguing. We started with a construction equipment base. Okay, here comes forestry, here comes mining, here comes agriculture, here comes marine, here comes, and it's scattered now. So again, the systems providers, my opinion, they're creating peanut butter. They're not providing specialized services anymore, which is one of the things that I think is coming at us. Here comes Salesforce as an example, that took a niche that was CRM that wasn't really looked after very well. Here comes Target. Here comes Coda. Here comes all of these things that are specialized tools that are excellent. How do you bolt them on?
And there are a lot of tools, along those lines that are not necessarily high dollar, that your small dealers can take advantage of, your telematics, your rental inspection apps, any of those kinds of things, your customer communication tools that can bolt on to any system. So that's where integratability becomes a big factor too. Whether you're big or small, how can these other kind of add-on pieces of technology supplement what you have?
And how does the dealer find those? Because typically those specialists, like text messaging on work order process or on back order process, those things, and there are people that provide that. But how the heck does a dealer find that? And those smaller companies, specialists, they don't really have good sales coverage.
And that's where I think, organizations like AED come into play, because, that's where all the players come together. Talking to folks like us, we obviously have a lot of relationships and can make recommendations, but, go to the conferences, even if Summit is too large for you, going to the leadership one or finance and HR or any of the, parts or operations type sessions, there are vendors that do show up that apply to those groups. And then you can at least, get to see some of these things firsthand and meet some of the players, as opposed to just trying to do a Google search, which is, mind numbing.
Yeah. But then you got to be careful, because again, that's where the salesmen are. So you got to be careful, because they'll say, we can solve your problem without even looking at what your problem is.
Yeah.
So that's where we get back to identifying what's the root cause of your pain and how best to resolve it. So yeah, you can find out who all's out there, but again, you got to know yourself and go through the due diligence before you listen to someone say, I can solve all your problems.
When I came into the States in 1983 and EBS, and I was in Denver, and there was a gentleman in Denver by the name of Bob Lane, who was a district rep for a manufacturer, ended up being chairman of the company. And in 1983-84, John Deere, that company, decided they were going to get in the software business. I had dinner with Bob, because I'm with EBS, and I said, okay, what the hell's going on? Are you guys going to make machines, or are you going to sell systems? He said, that's above my pay grade. Well, he became chairman, and I called him and asked him the same question. He said, well, that's somebody else one. He punted the answer, the question.
Yeah.
Within the manufacturers, within the OEMs, every single one of them, Caterpillar, Komatsu, Volvo, Dealer, Case, Deere, everybody has flirted with systems.
Well, they want to be able to get the data when they need the data, and that if they're dealing with several dealerships, let's say, they want it to all come to them in a standardized format, right? So if you can control that, then that's a plus, that's a gain, and you can regurgitate the information back to the marketing organizations or the dealerships in a unified manner. But then you start running into problems that not all dealers are the same. You can't make that assumption that just because it's a dealer of a heavy equipment dealer or a rental company, whatever, you can't make the assumption they're all the same, because when you start getting down into the weeds, they're like a fingerprint. They're all different.
You make my point, though, because none of those manufacturers, OEMs, are today peddling a software package other than Deere. And Deere market share is very low because of exactly what you're talking about. Every dealer, as much as we think they're the same, they're all different. They're all unique.
Yeah. Well, and they all have other side businesses. Some of them sell cranes, some of them sell ag, some of them sell other lines that may not have anything to do or, tangentially involved with the core business line. So a one size fits all software solution just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about tomorrow. Look down the road 5 years. Where the heck do you think we're going with technology in our industry?
I mean, I think the cloud is inevitable.
Yep.
There are dealers that really prefer on-premises software, and will fight that tooth and nail. But I think between just technology advances, cybersecurity concerns, the ability to really safeguard your data, the costs of servers, and people with the expertise to manage those things, cloud is inevitable, as much as people like to fight it. I do think that we're going to see more and more, kind of add-ons, the workflow providers, the again, different apps and other things that will bolt onto a core system, and maybe even see something more along the lines of a basic, trunk of the tree type system where that integratability comes in to where, you know, you can choose this rental or you can choose that, you know, that certificate of insurance tracking or what have you to kind of make your, you know, make your own adventure type of tool, as opposed to thinking that one system is going to do it all.
I think that's very much in our future, kind of like an octopus. We're going to have a core that holds the data. The cloud, I think, is inevitable, but again, the one size fits all is a risk for me because every dealer wants to have different pricing options, etc. So the cloud cannot be homogenous.
Yeah, the more proprietary it gets, the less.
Still configurable.
It's still configurable, but yeah, the less flexible it is.
Yeah, and then they'd be able to choose different pieces rather than one. I think, Jen, that's really, we'll have one rental package, we'll have one finance package, we'll have CRM reporting, all that stuff.
And and especially if you are one of those $25 to $200 million dealers, but you're looking to grow, you need to be able to have a platform that you can grow on.
That's scalable. Yeah.
For sure. And then maybe be able to change out some of those arms of the octopus as you grow and need a little bit more functionality. You know, because there are going to be some solutions that are just not as good of a fit anymore once you get to a certain number of locations or a certain level of complexity.
So where do you think working from home fits into this?
I mean, we're the wrong people to ask because we work from home. But
so do I. You know, but inside a dealership, can I provide customer service to customers without being in an office?
That has been a big topic of conversation at a lot of the events that I've attended over the last year. You know, I think the short answer is in many roles, yes, you can. However, I think that many dealer principals and leadership folks are not really embracing that just yet because we're still kind of bogged down in the notion of relationships and handshakes, which, you know, are important. They are a critical piece of this business, you know, as much as any other, and maybe especially this business. But you can still achieve that, I think, without necessarily having to be in your office at your desk, you know, 40 hours a week, every single day.
And it depends on the complexity of your product. I mean, also, you know, if you're in the administrative part of the business, your accounting, finance, purchase, those can be third party and even outsourced for that matter.
Yeah, they can work.
But you know, service obviously cannot unless you have a mobile service and you have enough trucks, you know, to meet the demand of your customers, your parameter. But
stay with that just for a second. Service has probably the lowest market share in our industry of any of the categories: parts, service, sales, rentals. And it, depending on who you talk to, if you really want to get positive, it's 30% of the available market of labor down to as low as 5%.
Yeah.
In order to be able to have the dealer take control of that, just think how much money and investment in buildings that is.
Yeah.
So that's not going to change. And as long as the dealer mechanic is not the primary person to place the order for the part,
right,
then the dealer parts business is at risk. So both of those things, to me, say that the dealer of the future might be at risk.
I mean, there are definitely some models out there. I mean, I know that you know of providers that are trying to kind of turn that upside down, you know, really privatizing the technicians as opposed to making them dealer employees. You know, there are a lot of different things going on to really upset the status quo. I mean, I think that there's always going to be a shop service component simply because, you know, not everything can be done in the field.
The only one that has been able to avoid that is Elon Musk. And that business model is I think 5 or 10 years from now, that's going to blow up.
Yeah. And I think that, again, going back to technology, you know, the more people can troubleshoot or do a diagnostic or something on their own, you know, I realize the whole, you know, legislation conversations that have been going on with right to repair and all those things are going to play into this too. I don't think, though, that the dealer service piece of it will ever completely go away, because even if you can, I mean, not everybody wants to.
How close do you think we are to individuals being able to self-diagnose?
Well, some of the machines are equipped to diagnose, like they send the oil, gas and other lube information back to the dealership, that they can from the field.
True, and telematics and all of that. I mean, I think that some of it's going to be legislation driven, some of it's going to be, people driven in terms of just technical ability and interest in doing those things. But I mean, I don't think it's truly that far off, good or bad.
We've got a Samsung washer and dryer at home that we can do all our diagnostics on the phone, directly talking to the washer or the dryer. It's and they talk back.
Yeah, our dryer does that too.
Yeah, I'll be in another state. I can tell her the wash is done.
Yeah, well, we've got the same thing. Unfortunately, we have two places, so we control the thermostat and monitor the tension and opening and closing doors from here for there and there to here. I mean, it's wild what you can do today.
But as they say, necessity is the mother of invention or change. And right now, there still is a huge shortage of technicians.
Huge.
And we see companies even trying to rob from each other, right? And these technicians will move for very little, and I think that will drive some of this change into making it more automated.
Yeah. I mean, we're hooked up with about 10 different schools across the country with the technical training with technicians, and some of the manufacturers have pretty powerful and strong technical training classes, product features and benefits classes. So I think you're right. There will always be a place for it, but I guess the rule that I look at is whoever's closest to the customer is going to win. And that's building a relationship, and that's based on trust. Yeah. And trust is based on performance, and performance requires technology. And whether it's a business system or a distributed system or cloud system or local, whatever it is, I don't see dealers having skills on board. Cybersecurity, you mentioned just quickly in the cloud. If the dealer's not scared to death about hacking their computers, I don't know where the hell they've been.
And from what we see, they're not enough.
Oh,
they're not scared enough.
We've had personally 2 instances where our bank accounts were hacked over the last 15 years. One emanated out of a hotel in London, and the other emanated out of a hack of, there's no firewall on your modems and your internet provider routers, which is really weird to consider. So there's a lot of brains that are working on the sideline trying to get into things. And I don't know very many dealers that have anybody that they contract with or employ who's a data security pro.
Yeah. Well, and there are some third parties that are specific to our industry that are great. And what I've been told, over the last few years, especially, is either having someone like that and or, a cloud, software provider is really your best bet, because then you have teams of people who have nothing else to do except become experts on this and stay experts on this, as opposed to 1 or 2 people at the dealership who may or may not be current on the latest technologies, the latest, hacking or incident prevention or whatnot.
One of the interesting things is when I was starting, the people who were doing consulting and data security had served prison terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I've met a few of them.
It's really remarkable, and I know many dealers, not 1 or 2, but many dealers that have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars through various nefarious activities.
Yes, we know.
But like you say, the benefit of the cloud having specialists that their life depends on, and they love it, and that's cool. That's just not, that's something we can outsource, and that's wonderful. Database manager, we can outsource it.
Yeah, well, and when you start looking at again, going back to the smaller dealers, you've got a $50 million dealer who might have, 50 employees. What are the chances that they're going to have someone in that area who is an expert and can stay current? Not nearly as likely.
Yeah, the other thing, a lot of those, and this is not disrespectful at all, but they rely on their children at university because they're a hell of a lot smarter on a lot of this stuff. My grandkids, 22 and 18, they shame me now, and you know, yeah. I've been involved with technology most of my life. The other thing that seems to be coming faster and faster, but is problematic, in data analytics.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of data that we're dealing with, in my view, is suspect. I don't think dealers have paid attention to that. Am I wrong?
Not as much as they should. No, and that's where some of the third-party providers out there can be a great resource, because when we started talking earlier about all of these bolt-ons and apps and third-party applications, really you need someone who's going to be able to pull data from all of those sources and give you the ability to manipulate it into the ways that you need to make decisions.
And that's where your octopus, that core, that we bolt everything on. Today, there's a lot of dealers that have differing systems. That example, let's just talk about a customer profile.
Yeah,
I've got 3 different systems. They have 3 different customer profiles, and guess what? They don't talk to each other, and different people are updated. That's where I'm worried about data.
Yeah, no,
you need a safe source.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there's always a big push on big data, get the data, but it's duplicate data, like you were alluding to. It's all duplicate, and once they got the data, they don't know how to utilize that data to make sound business decisions.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. The same thing's true with financial statements, Joe. What goes into the cost of sales in one place is different that goes in the other place. And so KPIs all of a sudden become, whoa, so there's a whole host of things, like the dealership. And let me make the simple analogy. The car dealer make money selling cars at list price because the manufacturer rebates based on volumes.
Mm-hmm.
The dealership, when I started, a typical tractor, D8, the most populous tractor on the planet, was under $100,000, believe it or not.
Wow.
So, it didn't really matter. And in those days, like right after World War II, there were 7 people that make tractors in America. I think today there's 3. And it's, all of this stuff is a function of the fact that we don't keep up with change, which is where technology, which is why I think this discussion is so important for people. Where have we been? Here's the track record. Here's the rate of change. It's pretty scary. A lot of people have sacred cows. I'm going to keep it that way. The acceleration of change is exponential. It's getting faster and faster. And here comes artificial intelligence. And God save me, I don't know where that's going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this has been a worthwhile discussion. Any final closing thoughts either of you would want to say to dealers when they're looking at technology?
I mean, in a nutshell, there's so many packages out there. Like I said before, there's not one best provider and everyone else is awful. It's just who's the best fit for you. So don't be afraid to go out there and ask questions and ask for help if you need help. But be sure to ask all the questions that need to be asked to get the best solution for you.
Yeah, do the due diligence. Don't just accept their word that they're the best for you.
Or your buddy's word.
Yeah.
Okay, and I
know yourself.
I agree with that all 100%. One last thing, let me ask from a teaching perspective. What are you seeing as the biggest need of kids in university these days relative to the business world?
Application of what they're learning.
I agree 100%. It's too much theory still, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I enjoy about my classes is I was a practitioner before I was a teacher. So I had wished when I was in college, these were professors who went to school through taught school, and I couldn't get, why would I do it? How am I going to use this? Yeah, how's this going to apply? And so that's what I try to bring in, and I hope more professors do that.
I agree with you 100%. I had a teacher in physics, thermodynamics, and he didn't mark on a curve. The pass was 18%. Only one person passed. We were all in the honors program, math, physics. He was a concert pianist at the age of 25 and a PhD in physics. The guy was brilliant, I had a cousin who was a PhD in nuclear physics in the 50s. He was brilliant. He's one of maybe a dozen men on the planet. He's since passed. But the young kids today are confronted with so many choices. And the reason I bring it back is that comes right back to the systems and technology. We are confronted as people with so many choices, and we're not equipped, in my view, to make the choice.
Yeah, I tell my students to be critical thinkers.
Yep. Well, thank you, the power couple of the industry. I appreciate the time, and I hope everybody listening to this got something out of it, and thank you for attending this candid conversation, and we look to having one again in the near future with you. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thanks, Ron.